Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk about one of the most confusing teams in the league to me, the Brooklyn Nets. To me, they're one of the biggest X factors in the Eastern Conference because I could see them being incredible, winning the Eastern Conference and going on to win a title, or I could even see them completely imploding and missing the playoffs entirely, and I can't decide which one it's going to be. So today, I want to go and talk about why I think the Brooklyn Nets are so volatile, why I'm both sold on them, and why I think they don't make any sense. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Let me know your thoughts on the Brooklyn Nets, and let's get into it. Let's start off by going through what their probable starting lineup and bench are going to be. In the starting lineup, they have, of course, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and Nick Claxton. And off the bench, they have names like Patty Mills, Seth Curry, Royce O'Neal, TJ Warren, Markieff Morris, Kessler Edwards, Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, guys like that. Now let's talk about why that team makes sense. Starting off with, of course, Kevin Durant. He's still one of the best players in the world, regardless of how poorly that playoff run went, with them being the only team swept in the entire playoffs this past year, and him really struggling. I still believe that Kevin Durant can be the best player on a championship team. He just averaged 30 points per game to go along with 6.5 assists in typical KD insanely efficient fashion. I think ultimately the team was just kind of on its last legs, and I think KD is still this incredible player regardless of how the season ended. Alongside him, of course, you have Kyrie Irving, who when he plays is still incredible. He averaged 27.5 points per game this past season in the 29 games that he did play. He's had playoff success in the past, being a huge piece to why the Cavaliers won that 2016 title, including hitting the shot that ended up winning them the whole thing. He's still really unguardable on most nights. He has the best handles in the game. He can finish around the rim with the best of them. Him and KD are probably still the best offensive duo in the entire NBA. Rounding out the big three, you have Ben Simmons, their newest acquisition. Ben didn't play at all last year, but coming into this year, he looks like on paper a perfect fit next to Kyrie and KD as the third member of that big three. He's a guy that now that he's in Brooklyn behind those two guys, he can kind of just focus on playmaking and slashing to the basket, where in Philly, he was a bit more of a second option, looked at to be the second guy on that team behind Joel Embiid. Now that he's the number three, I feel like that's a role he's a bit more suited for. All he's got to do is tack the basket, dunk, take a couple shots here and there, play make, and be a high-level defender covering for some of the defensive flaws of his two co-stars in KD and Kyrie Irving, and that's really all he's kind of got to do to be a good fit alongside these guys. Set them up for good shots, they're going to knock them down, and he could even be a little versatile. He can guard from 1 to 4, maybe even play some small ball 5 if they need him to. If they want to run out a lineup of KD, Kyrie, 2 shooters, and Ben Simmons, it could be a really lethal combo where he drives to the basket and you have 4 guys on the perimeter that can all knock down 3-point shots at a 40% clip. Things could get really scary for opposing teams, especially if that's their go-to lineup in crunch time. Then on paper, you have a really solid supporting cast around those 3 guys. You have Seth Curry and Joe Harris, who can knock down their threes at a 40% clip almost any given season, and trust me, they're going to get a ridiculous amount of wide open looks with those 3 players on the court next to them. Then you have Patty Mills, who's a really solid backup point guard and gives you just another high-level shooter to add to the arsenal. They added Royce O'Neal, who's a solid 3-and-D option. There's Nick Claxton, who's shown a ton of defensive potential, and then you have TJ Warren, who was balling like crazy last time we saw him play. It seems like a really deep roster, one with guys that can complement each other's skill sets in the best ways possible, and if they're optimized correctly, they have one of the best rosters in the league. I feel like they've truly built something that on paper can be phenomenal. And so everything sounds pretty good for the Brooklyn Nets, but games aren't played on paper, and there are a lot of things that make me think this thing's not going to work. Starting off with Kyrie and Kevin Durant, last year they got swept in the playoffs, both getting clamped. There weren't many other players outside of those two that could create their own shots, and so Boston really focused them down. In the offseason, they added a bunch of solid pieces, but there's not really any guys that can go out and create their own shots at a high level outside of maybe TJ Warren, who we'll get to in a bit. Ben Simmons is great at creating for others, but in terms of creating his own shot, that's never been a strength. And so that still could be a huge factor heading into the playoffs, where teams might just completely focus down these 2 stars and try and clamp them up again. Then we get to Ben Simmons, who, while on paper again, seems like a great fit, hasn't played basketball in a year. it's probably going to take him some time to kind of get going again and fit into this role. And even then, we're still not 100% sure this is going to work. He's still not a shooter. I've reached this point where I don't really ever think he is going to become a willing shooter. So far through a couple preseason games, it doesn't seem like Ben Simmons is going to be a shooter this season. Not that I expected him to or anything, but now we just kind of know for sure. And so when you reach the clutch time and Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving are trying to create a bucket for themselves, who's to say you just don't leave Ben Simmons wide open on the perimeter and let him try and shoot a three if he wants to? If he doesn't, then he's just kind of chilling there on the perimeter, not really adding, and he could really slow down the offense. Against the Miami Heat this past night, as I'm recording this video, they just kind of let Ben Simmons do whatever. They knew he wasn't going to shoot, so they played the passing lanes heavy, and they forced him into 6 turnovers. You can't have that. He's got to be aggressive, and I just don't know if he's going to be. Additionally, while the idea of him playing small ball center sounds great, you know, it opens up the court more, bringing in more shooters, is he going to be able to do that consistently? Again, against the Miami Heat tonight, there's a clip where Bam Adebayo kind of just rammed into him and completely shoved him out of the way. If he has to go up against like Joel Embiid in the playoffs, how is he going to fare? I don't think he's going to really have a ton of success. Or if he has to go up against high-flying guys like a Robert Williams or an Al Horford, just guys that are going to really bruise with him down low, especially when you have to be a bit concerned about his injury history. Do you want him playing that small ball center that often, or is it kind of just a better idea on paper and one that really won't work out when you get to the playoffs? Then we get to the supporting cast, which once again looks great on paper, but in practice might not work out as well as you might want it to. Seth Curry's a guy that I'm really not concerned about. He was phenomenal last season, and I think he's going to be fine, but the other shooter in Joe Harris missed basically all of last year, so it might take some time for him to kind of work back to where he wants to go. And even then, if he's your starter at the shooting guard spot, which it seems like he is, then you've got Kyrie, Joe Harris, and Kevin Durant as your 1, 2, and 3, and none of them are particularly good defensively. Kyrie and Joe Harris are negative defenders, and KD is decent at times, but last year he really took a step back on that end. Ben Simmons is really solid, but outside of him, there's no other elite defenders in that lineup. Nick Claxton has shown defensive versatility at times, but it feels like there's more like potential upside with him rather than immediate results. Then you've got Patty Mills, who's another smaller guard. Seth Curry, who we talked about, isn't a good defender either. Royce O'Neal is fine at times, but he's not this high-level defender that's going to help save you, so defense is kind of a concern with this overall team. And then we get to TJ Warren, who once again, in theory, it sounds like a great idea to have him on this team, be a high-level bucket getter off the bench that could kind of help switch up the offensive looks that they show other teams, but he hasn't played since the bubble, which was over 2 years ago at this point. Are we even sure we're going to see the same version of TJ Warren? Is he going to come back kind of slow and inefficient? Will he still have the step that he had before? Will he still be effective as a shooter? We don't know, to be honest. And if he looks not great, it's not a huge loss because they signed him to a minimum contract. But to me, it feels like a lot of their bench outlook is kind of depending on TJ Warren coming back and being a contributor. And if he doesn't, then it's kind of washed. Then at the backup big spot, they really don't have anyone there. They've got Day'Ron Sharpe, who has shown some flashes here and there, but I don't know if he's quite ready to produce now. And they have Markieff Morris, who they can play as a small ball center, but they've already got Ben Simmons, who can kind of do that. They really just kind of need a big center, and they don't have one on the team. Then we have Steve Nash as a coach, who I'm not really sold on at all. To me, it feels like he's kind of just average, if at all decent. I'm really not sure with him, but overall what I saw in the playoffs last season, I'm not impressed. And when you have a championship caliber team, you have to have a good coach. It is very rare that teams win a championship with not at least a solid coach, and I'm not quite sure Steve Nash is up to that level at this point. Maybe at some point down the line, but right now I'm not sold. And then you have the situation where Kevin Durant literally asked for him to be fired in part of his trade demands this past season. I know he tried to play it off at media day saying like, oh, fights between family happens all the time or whatever, but I'm still plenty concerned. If you have a time where, say, you start the season slow, those talks are going to get a lot louder about Steve Nash potentially getting fired because Nets ownership, KD has said that he didn't want him. He said that he would leave if they didn't fire Steve Nash. And so now, say they go out and kind of struggle, KD's probably going to look at Steve Nash and be like, I told y'all so, you should have fired him. And that's going to build some noise. The front office is going to start to have doubt in him. The fans, I know from looking on Twitter, already doubt him. So he could get fired midway through the year, and championship teams don't really ever go through those types of situations. It feels like all this drama is going to weigh on everyone's psyche, especially when we talk about the whole fact that their two biggest stars wanted to leave this past offseason. Sure, they wanted to come back and play, but I'm sure a lot of the reasons why they asked out are still weighing on them, like KD not liking Sean Marks or Steve Nash and kind of maybe being in a I told you so situation if they start struggling. Kyrie Irving not feeling respected by the organization getting a contract extension, that's probably going to weigh on him too, especially if he's looking forward to, oh, what team am I going to play for next, and kind of checks out by the end of the season, or if he just stops playing games for some reason like he's done in the past. All of this stuff and this drama, while sure winning cures everything in the NBA, who says they're going to go out and win right away? There's so many question marks, and if they start kind of slow, it feels like it could kind of snowball into a point where who knows if KD might, ask out again, or even if he doesn't do it publicly, I'm sure rumors could start circulating about maybe the fact that, oh, KD's, still kind of wanting out. He's still feeling things out. And, Kyrie Irving, he's going to leave this free agency. All of that stuff can really weigh on a team and prevent them from being the level of team that they want to be in the end of things. Then you have the fact that the team as a whole is pretty injury prone. Like we said, KD has been dealing with injuries these past few seasons. Ben Simmons is coming off missing a whole year with injury, his whole back issue. It could possibly flare up again, and if it doesn't, they still are probably going to have to rest him. Joe Harris just missed the full year. TJ Warren's coming back to basketball for the first time in 2 seasons. It just feels like they could have multiple injuries, and if 1 or 2 stars miss time, it's going to really take a huge hit. They're better equipped than they were last year to deal with a star's injury, but the Eastern Conference is so loaded that if 1, 2, or even all 3 of those guys miss some time, they're going to rapidly fall in the standings. They showed these past playoffs that they're not a team that can kind of just waltz into the playoffs like, oh, okay, we were a play-in team, but whatever, it's the playoffs now, anything can happen. They got swept, and they were the only team in the playoffs to do so. So, even though you added Ben Simmons and some other guys, is that enough to go from being swept to beating a contending team if you're a play-in team? I don't really think it is. So they've got to perform, and with all these question marks, I think there's a good chance that they're much lower than they want to be heading into the playoffs. There is no team that is quite as polarizing in my mind. You talk with some people, they think the Nets are going to be this juggernaut. You talk with other people, they think that the whole thing is going to implode within a couple weeks of the season starting, and I could potentially see both ways. To me, I think they're probably going to be pretty good. In my season prediction video that I just dropped, I had them around the 5th seed because, of these question marks. I think the talent and I think everything, once again, works on paper, but the NBA's never played on paper. It is all about execution and how things actually look when you get on the court. And with the Nets, there are just so many question marks that I really don't know what's going to happen. It's either going to be this incredible feat of basketball where they all come together despite trade demands and look elite, or it's going to be a train wreck that I can't help but not look away from. And those are my thoughts on the Brooklyn Nets. Go ahead and comment down below letting me know how you think the Nets are going to do this season. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say. As always, appreciate y'all's support on these videos. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, as well as hit the notification bell so you don't miss any uploads. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real One, say it back.